Welcome to Beyond the Needle, the Aesthetics Business Podcast. I'm your host, Emily Ruse. I'm a former clinic manager turned digital marketing freelancer, and I've had the privilege of helping dozens of aesthetic practitioners across the UK and beyond grow their business. So I know firsthand just how challenging it can be to build a successful aesthetics practice in today's competitive market. Each week, I'm here to share real, actionable strategies and bring on expert guests to help you level up, attract more patients, and build a standout brand. Let's turn your passion into a thriving business together. Hi everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Beyond the Needle podcast. And today I'm joined by the straight-talking, strategy-driven Sara Cheeney, founder of Pure Perfection Clinic and one of the UK's most in-demand business coaches for aesthetic practitioners. With over 15 years in aesthetics and a clinic that stood the test of time since 2008, Sara brings a rare blend of clinical experience, commercial instinct, and unfiltered honesty. Since 2019, she's coached hundreds of clinics through everything from pricing, hiring, and systems to marketing messes, device disasters, and the complicated realities of becoming a KOL. This episode is a goldmine for any practitioner who wants to run a smoother, more profitable business without burning out or getting pulled into industry smoke and mirrors. We talk about the operational red flags that she sees time and time again, why most practitioners hate selling and how to shift that mindset, and what you really need to know before investing in a device, a marketing company, or a shiny new opportunity that promises more than it delivers. We also dive into how Sara's obsession with skin health shaped her clinic and her coaching style, what to do before hiring and the biggest boundaries clinic owners fail to set, how to build sales confidence even if you hate selling, and why rash decisions after conferences or trainings can derail your progress. If you've ever felt stuck in your business, unsure where your time and money are really going, or like you need someone in your corner who just gets it, this conversation is packed with so much amazing advice and real grounded, proven strategy. So let's dive into it. But before we do, just a reminder, if you do enjoy these episodes, please do hit subscribe and please do leave me a little review as well. I really do appreciate it. Okay, let's get into it. Hi, Sara. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's so lovely to have you on the podcast, and I'm so excited to pick your brains. I think you're going to give so much great advice to all of our listeners. Now, you've been in aesthetics since 2008, I believe, and you've been coaching for the last 6 years, other practitioners. So can you take us back to what originally brought you into this space and how that has evolved into the coaching business that you have today?
Yeah, so I came into the industry, like you said, in 2008. And that was because really, as a teenager, I suffered from a skin disorder when I was going through puberty, which psoriasis, that's what it was. And I ended up having steroid creams for it, which thinned my skin. And in a nutshell, I happened to go to a clinic on the NHS in Liverpool back in 1990. I actually found the letter from the clinic the other day, which is so real. So I went to this clinic, had some laser on my stretch marks, and it was there really when I was sitting in the waiting room and when I was having the laser that I saw lots of available things that you could have. So it wasn't as big as it is today. It was just in its infancy back then. But I was just like, wow, if you can make somebody feel amazing by fixing their physical but also moving their psychological to another level of confidence. What a great job. I want to do this.
What were you doing at the time?
I was 15. I was in
Oh,
school.
wow. So you knew from that point that you wanted to get into
I didn't know from that point. I became interested and, the laser itself, I remember sitting on the bed being scared. It stung a little bit. They were lovely with me there, but I remember thinking, this is fascinating. And then I started watching, I mean, it's not on the TV now, but there used to be a program called Extreme Makeover. It was very American where, they picked people who really hadn't looked after themselves. And, they really had this big reveal in a hotel with a show. They'd done their hair, their makeup, they'd had their cosmetic surgery, their aesthetics. I absolutely loved it. And from that point, I wanted to create something like that, a journey through my clinic. So that's when I started my journey, really, thinking about what I wanted to do. And, from then on, I went to college, went to do my degree in nursing, but was also keen on, the beauty industry. So I was actually dual trained as a nurse. And whilst I was in my nursing career, I taught myself at night to be a skin esthetician as well.
Wow, okay, so you got into the aesthetic side of things very early on in your nursing career.
I was just quite keen to learn all about beauty elements. I trained all beauty therapy, from doing people's eyebrows to doing their facials. There wasn't such a thing, it wasn't such a big thing, the aesthetics sector and journey. The training was difficult. It was training to get, on board with everything. It wasn't as specialized. So I had to do all the training from all elements of beauty. But then in my nursing career, no, it wasn't aesthetics. That was like surgical nurse, and I was a theatre
Mhm.
nurse.
Okay. So you finished university, you started your nursing career. At what point then in your nursing career, or how far into your nursing career, did you then think, right, I'm really going to put everything into aesthetics? This is what I want to do.
It was 2008 when I started my aesthetics career. I've been nursing since the year 2000. So I had a wealth of experience working across the surgical board of the hospital. And yes, I started thinking I need to learn more about the aesthetics, and, injectables mainly was my keen point of interest then, and skincare.
Yeah. And you've obviously grown a really successful clinic. You've been doing it for a really long time. And then eventually that led you into becoming a coach as well for other aesthetic practitioners who are, starting their career in aesthetics, or, maybe they're a few years in and they just want to scale, or they've, hit a point where they aren't growing anymore and they need a little bit of help and advice. How did you find yourself getting into that? What led you to want to do that?
So initially, I remember when I got into aesthetics, it was really hard. There wasn't many clinics doing it. I wanted to get it right. I remember thinking, where was the best place to do training? When I first did my training, I remember thinking when I first did that injectable course, oh my goodness, this was such a bad experience. And I was given a certificate to be let loose on my patients. I just couldn't believe it, to be honest. So I wasn't happy with that. So I continued to do lots and lots of training, spent a lot of time and effort and a lot of money doing lots of different courses until I felt really confident that I would be able to look after my patients. So that was kind of like the baseline of thinking, right, I started a clinic. Nobody wanted to help me. No clinics that I rang. There wasn't many back in the day around me at the time, but I remember going and calling clinics saying, can I come spend some time with you? And then eventually, when I did my nurse prescribing, I joined BANAM, what was called the BACN back then, and I met more people in the industry. And I met this wonderful nurse in the South, who I thought was inspiring and had been doing it a long time. And she had a lot of experience. So, whilst I was doing my prescriber training, I asked her if I could go and spend a week at her clinic. And that really changed my mindset, really, spending that week with her, understanding how I wanted my clinic to be. And like I said, she'd been doing it a long time. So that's how I started building my journey. But then, training wise, it was just something that it happened. I fell into it because of my passion for skin health and my success with my own patients. I was invited to speak about that on some of the platforms and conferences. And from there, I was absolutely scared stiff. I'd never done any public speaking before. I didn't have the experience. I was wondering, you have imposter syndrome thinking, who's going to want to listen to me? Anyway, I did it and I enjoyed it. And they asked me again many times. And that evolved from talking about my experience in my own clinic to becoming a teacher for skin health with a very well-known brand. So once I did that, I then got asked to do lots more teaching and speaking. And I really enjoyed the feeling of helping other people and making life a bit easier for them on their journeys. And then we went into the dreaded COVID-19 lockdown. And I thought, well, I'm going to carry on teaching people in lockdown, which is what I did, teach my patients skin health on live Zooms and doing online consultations from home. And then I started getting calls from clinics all over the place, which I'd taught or and heard me speaking at events, asking me, how could I help make sure that they safeguarded their business from failing through lockdown. And some people were really desperate, saying, we're going to lose everything. We've still got a lot of bills to pay. The clinics are closing. Life's crazy. Anyway, that went from me thinking, actually, I could help people with their businesses. And just before lockdown, I'd even thought about that and thought about how can you help people in business. You see so many mistakes happening. And I trialed something that I called a strategy day at the time, where people spent the day with me looking at the four elements of business, which were finance, HR, marketing, and operations. That went well and I enjoyed it. But obviously, then lockdown threw a spanner in everything. But then that just made me, it really cemented the fact that people did want help because I had people reaching out to me from all over the place. So that's when the business coaching really started. And I thought, I can do one-to-one mentoring, talking online to people on Zoom or on the phone every week to keep them accountable. So that's what I did. And then obviously clinics reopened. It was a really crazy time because people hadn't been out. So clinics were really, really busy. And then the business coaching was there as well. So kind of like I separated my life into half of it being working at the clinic and half of it coaching and mentoring.
Nice, really nice. So kind of lockdown kind of pushed you to do something that you'd been thinking about anyway, but it just gave you that drive to do it.
Yeah, definitely. And when I was in college, business studies was something I enjoyed. I studied it at both A level and GCSE and was always keen to understand. So I'd been part of an entrepreneurs group for quite some time before. I was quite keen to, understand business and the business elements of running the business. So once I'd done that and helping others was something that naturally came to me.
Yeah, I love that. And you've said that one of the things that you like advising clinics on is like, or one of the things that you talk to a lot of clinics about is the mistakes that they're making or things that they could be doing better. What are the biggest red flags that you typically see over and over again in clinics that are struggling?
So I remember first the time I went to a convention and thinking, wow, I've got imposter syndrome. What am I doing here? I don't fit in. I didn't fit in. I didn't know anything. I didn't know anybody. Well, I thought I didn't, but I knew quite a bit. But it was a confidence thing. But once I did that lots and lots of times and I got to understand the circuit of aesthetics, events, collaborations, meetings, and the journeys of what people go through, I then started understanding actually people go to things like a rabbit in the headlights. They follow, certainly today online, they follow trends. They think that what they see from what other people are doing are great success stories, and they're often not. So the biggest red flags to me are, stay on your own journey. Don't be fooled by thinking something successful. You need to sit down and think about what you're embarking on. If you're taking on a new service in your clinic, taking on a new device, starting a marketing strategy, hiring new people, you have to think about measuring the success of it, measuring the cost of it, and setting some, business plan around what you're going to do. Because too often I see people are too busy in life. They're running through life without making proper decisions. They're firefighting through their journey. So they go to events, they see a big shiny tool like a machine, let's say. They will see some celebrity endorsement behind it, some champagne dinner they may be invited to, or even trips abroad these days, which just seems to be the in thing. And then they think that they can let's do it. I'm going to be super successful. They've invited me to be a key opinion leader. Wow, seems to be a lot of people in aesthetics want to be called that key opinion leader for the wrong reasons. And those things are the red flags, really, the biggest red flags. Don't jump into anything. Think about your clinic, your patients, what you set out to achieve when you started, what your patients want, not what you want or what you feel like success looks like.
Yeah, because everyone's, success happens at their own pace. It's not like worth comparing yourself to somebody else that you know in the industry who's doing well. But I love that because I think, and I've talked about this a lot on this podcast, like a lot of people have said about, buying machines getting wrapped up into the marketing. And actually I think it's really like difficult not to do in a lot of cases because there are so many amazing devices now and you go to a conference and you're just like everywhere you turn there's something new. And there also seems to be, the trend where a device will be like, I don't know, a case study will come out, of a celebrity who's had certain treatment and with a certain device. I'm sure there's a few that are popping into people's minds. And then every clinic's like, oh God, I've got to get this device now because everyone's going to be Googling it. And it is hard not to get wrapped up in it. When do you think, if there are clinics listening who are maybe thinking about buying a new device or maybe investing in their first device, what advice would you give to them to know that it's the right, how to know it's the right time to do it?
I'm laughing thinking about, I've been there, done that, and bought a t-shirt when it comes to what you were just talking about for sure. And I think back and I think, wow, how expensive some of the devices were. It was like buying a mortgage. As a business coach now, I see the other side of that where people have come to me, they've bought devices which actually could send their business under because it's just been too much of a cash flow problem caused by having a lease of something they have to pay back. And they really haven't got the infrastructure to make that money back. They may not have the clients, they may not have the resource. They don't know what they're doing with it. They're often left to their own devices. But yeah, you've just got to not do that. And when you think about your clinic, you think about what you want to offer your patients. What staff skills have you got in the clinic? What have you got in, patient demand? What's going to make a difference? What's safe? Patients today, they want quick wins with no downtime. And I think that it's got worse. People have this majorly high expectation of wanting to look a certain way, but they either don't have the budget or they don't want to go through the downtime and the hard work to get there. So it's about looking at all those things and seeing, what fits in your clinic model at that time. And once you find out what kind of technology or treatment you want to provide, it's then doing your due diligence, looking at what are the comparisons, what's available, and nailing it down to three top pieces of kit or services that you want to do, and then looking, where's the training provided? Is the treatment safe? What's the support around it? What's the cost for me? And not just the cost of bringing that service to the clinic, but the ongoing cost, the training, the insurance, the marketing, getting the sales. And I remember, actually thinking back to lockdown and you saying about, these celebrity endorsements and before and afters, just exactly that happened to me before lockdown. And I was wowed by the results. And it wasn't just that. I'd seen the piece of kit that was advertised at the time. And I liked the technology and the science behind it. I liked the brand. And I did buy that piece of kit, and when I look back at the invoice, which I still have, I think it was £89,000 for this piece of kit. And do you know what? It came in and then we went into lockdown. So it was like, oh my goodness, there's this huge piece of kit now gonna sit in the clinic because we're closed. I was very lucky that I loved the device. I really embraced it. Patients loved it. The time when I bought it, there was celebrity endorsement around it, which really helped to drive sales to the clinic. And the device was a super successful device. Patients had the service. We made our income back from the device, and it continued to serve as well as a multi-platform device within the clinic. But so many times I see this isn't the case, and people buy an expensive piece of kit where they really, really didn't need to buy that. They can offer services without doing that and ensuring that their patients do get results without having that huge risk. Because what you find is that pressure, that financial pressure that comes with buying a device, sometimes people then maybe force sales of things that patients don't need because they're so desperately under pressure to pay off their lease. They make mistakes, and it's not always the right thing. So, for me, I would say that is probably one of the biggest red flags is, the devices and bringing too many treatments. And I don't see it as I love to watch Kitchen Nightmares on the TV with Gordon Ramsay. Obviously, that is so true. What he says in all of that is the biggest takeaway is don't have too many things on your menu in the restaurant. And it's the same in a clinic. You can't be the master of everything.
Otherwise, it becomes very overwhelming as well, just to like market these things when you've got so much. It's like, how do I talk about all of these different services, And they all kind of need to be busy in their own way, especially if they're devices that you're paying off. But I think, yeah, and you did briefly touch on this, but also surveying your patients about what they actually want in terms of treatments, I think is something that a lot of people don't do for some reason. But someone said to me the other day, they really wanted to invest in a CO2 laser. Like they really wanted to offer that. But then they were asking their patients just when they were coming in for their normal appointments about whether this is something they consider. And everyone said no because of the downtime that comes with it. And I think that's so important because, just because you as a practitioner want to offer something doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right thing to do. Because at the end of the day, if your patients aren't going to be interested in it because they don't want to go through a week or 2 weeks worth of downtime, there's absolutely no point in offering it. And like you say, there's always going to be other things that could achieve similar results that don't involve such a big outgoing cost. So yeah, I think that's really important.
Emily, that's so interesting that you say that then, because that is a real time situation for me. What I had with one of my coaching clients just a couple of weeks ago. The client is really, really clever and really wanted to bring on something like that into the clinic. Really, scientifically driven, perfectionist, as many people are in the sector, but he wanted it for him. And I said, you're already overwhelmed, which is what I find with a lot of my clinic owners, that I'm coaching. They're overwhelmed. So, yes, I said, let's do an aesthetic interest questionnaire and let's look at, why do we want that in clinic? It's usually the clinic practitioner that wants it. And it's, like you said, it's not always what the patient wants, but also that is such a specialized treatment. Then I'm often coaching the clinic owner and they're already overwhelmed. So they're going to take on a service that only them can do because the team, in the clinic that work around them potentially can't do that service because it's so advanced. So then you've got to look back and think, right, yes, what do your patients want and need? What are they willing to put up with in downtime and preparation? And actually, is it you that needs to be super busy or is it your team? And, that is another mistake. Patients, clinic owners, sorry, grow around their business thinking it's all about them. And then they want to get bigger and be, well known and have a team. But then they forget that they've built this business around them and people come to see them. And it's really, really difficult. And, this is probably every clinic owner's like nightmare. The clinic is them, people want to see them, but then they get so busy and overwhelmed that they want to get out of being the person that everybody wants to see. But once you've built your business brand around that, it becomes really difficult to then scale a team around you that you're actually saying, well, actually, you may as well see them because they're just as good as me. But patients always come back to say, oh, we'd never go to see anyone else. We want to come and see you. But as the clinic owner, you usually have been practicing on the ground in the early days to get it going, really working hard, getting your columns busy. And then you want to get away from that and other people to run the columns so you can grow and develop. And it's tough. But we're all sort of all clinic owners that I speak to, they all want to micromanage, they're all perfectionists. They all do not want to give anything away, and they're total control freaks. To run a business, a successful business, it should be able to run without you there, and you're able to direct over it. So you have to come to terms with writing systems, operations in place, so that people know what to do, and you grow a procedure for everything that you do so that somebody else can step into those shoes.
Mm, this is something I see a lot actually. Is actually probably one of the biggest problems that clinic owners have is exactly what you just said. They, when they start off, as a newbie, they've just started their clinic. Obviously, it's all about them, right? They've probably not got a team at that point. It's just them. So, and one of the things that I preach, like as a marketer, is, you are the face of your brand. You are the reason people are going to come to you. So you need to be the face of your brand. You need to be putting yourself out there. So it is really hard then when years down the line, you want to step back a little bit and let other team members, the team members that you've now built over time and brought into your clinic, take a little bit more off of your plate. But like you say, people don't want to necessarily see them. They want to see the clinic owner, the face of the brand, the person who's like looks like, the real expert at the top. Do you have any advice for how clinic owners can do that successfully, as in like step back a little bit and let other team members take, or like let other team members be as attractive to patients as them? Because I think this is like one of the hardest things that aesthetic practitioners go through.
Yeah, so I spent a lot of lockdown thinking about that and writing SOPs for my business. And you've got to think about all the elements that it takes, all the pillars of running a business. And then you've got to realize that you will have to delegate. And, I'm saying this from a position of a clinic owner, a practitioner on the ground. I've made those mistakes. You have to learn to delegate and write a clear procedure on how things are to be done. But you've also got to give a time specific deadline for what you want doing and when. It has to be clear. The rule has to be clear of what you're telling them to do. For example, you might be the clinic practitioner in the room. You're also ordering all your own stock because nobody else can possibly order the right stock from the right place for you. Things like that. So you've got to write a service operating procedure for, right, on Monday every week, there's a stock take. These are the places where we buy from. This is the budget. This is the stock list. This is what you do. And you have minimum stock quantities in the clinic. Then you'll get the clinic owner saying, and this is what I get on coaching all the time, but they didn't do it well enough. They didn't do it like me. And I'm saying, well, but they did do it, didn't they? And it was good enough. so that the clinic could operate. So from a clinic owner's perspective, you have to write all the jobs that need to be done in the clinic for it to be running effectively, and delegating, and it's in training your team and giving them praise. And if they're not doing it exactly right, then give them some credit, because it's probably 75% as good as what you would do. And anything that's not quite right, you go in and say, look, you did that really well, but next time, here's some tips to do it even better. Don't go in, shouting at them or telling them they've done it wrong, because nobody wants to hear that in life, do they? It's about building people up and making them feel confident enough so that they can do things without you there. And that's the same issue with, if you're the practitioner on the ground and you're doing a lot of the treatments, and you want to get away from doing that and you want your team to do it. So, depending on the skill set of the team and what you want them to do, you need to find that person, hire them, make sure they've had the right training and development plan with you. And then you say to your patients, look, I'm going to hand you over to my well esteemed colleague who can do the treatments just as good as me, if not better. And if you are struggling with that, you can always put a different pricing point in place so that if they see you, the true expert that started, they pay a little bit more of a premium. And you've got to follow it through, or you've got to say, I'm not taking any new patients on, but I've trained whatever person it is to do that. And you're in totally safe hands. I have my treatments with them. And really, you've got to get away from that, because in the future, if you think about your exit strategy, which you should always think about when you're in a business, you've got to think one day that business, you're going to retire and want to sell it, essentially. And to do that, if you're trying to sell a business that you are in and you're fundamentally the person that brings in the most revenue for the business, it's not really a sellable item. So it's about building that team around you, giving them the skills, empowering them in both how you speak to them, how you train them, everything that you do, so that you've got a team around you and you can go in and do your favorite patients that you've had for such a long time. You might do a couple of days a week, or if you've got several clinics, you might do a specialized day a week or a fortnight or a month in those clinics. But then around that, you're the director of the business. And what that means is you're looking and developing the future of that business, how it can move forward, seeking the opportunities. And if you're not doing that, you need to start, mapping that out, because if you, and again, I speak from a position of being there, running my own clinic for all these years. If you're sitting in the ground in your clinic every single day and you're absolutely so busy trying to operate the business and be the practitioner, you're going to miss valid opportunities. You're not going to run effectively and you're going to fight fires. So it's really, really important to build that. I think when you start a business, which is what I didn't know back then at the time, but what I know now is if I was starting a business today, you start with the end in mind and you're building that organizational chart of what you think that business is going to look like at its endpoint. You won't have all those people in all those positions in the start. You won't have the funding to put all those people in all those positions in the start. But at least if you're driving that from a position of this is the end goal, you can build towards that end goal. And that's where the success is, I think, in a successful clinic, making sure that you get away from doing everything for everybody every day.
Yeah, I love that. That's such great advice. So yeah, thinking with the end goal in mind rather than just going through the day to day and hoping for the best.
Yeah, and it's a very successful book I've read, and I can't remember for the life of me the name of it now, but it says start with the end in mind and, think big, think big, think what you want to achieve, live your wildest dreams, put them down. And something that I still follow today is, I have something called a dream board. And on my dream board, I have the next 4 years of what I'm doing and what I want to achieve professionally and personally. And I'm always checking in on that, especially if I've had a bad day, and we all have those bad days, and anyone that tells you they don't have a bad day, they're not telling the truth. And on those bad days, I am looking at that thinking, well, actually, I've already achieved this. And perhaps I haven't achieved so much that I wanted to achieve today, but I'm already on my way to achieving those goals. So you've got to keep yourself accountable.
Yeah, and also just checking in with your goals to make sure that you're on track and to keep you on track as well. Because I've read somewhere that if you have your goals written down in a place that you can see them, you're something like 80% more likely. I mean, don't quote me on that, but you're much more likely to achieve them than if you were to like say them in your head to yourself what you want to achieve, or have them written down and then never look at them again. You need to be constantly checking in and thinking, am I actually doing the things that I need to be doing in order to achieve those goals, or have I just completely gone off on a tangent?
And have them there, in your on your fridge, in your
Yeah.
wall,
Post-it notes
yeah,
on your office, on your
yeah, somewhere
computer.
where you
Yeah.
can think, right, okay, is making that decision really gonna get me closer to that thing that I wanted on my dream board, whether it be personally or professionally. And, people always say, "Oh, I put huge dreams and they're too big, really." And I said, "No dream's ever too big." And, as long as you put it into a dream on there and then you start, what does that dream look like? It's no point in listing, I want this an amazing, I don't know, Maserati or some sort of fancy car. It's got to be, I want this car that's going to cost this price in this color by this date.
Yeah.
Because it's got to be a specific goal. It's not an open-ended goal. I want this. And and then you've got to start thinking to yourself, why do I want it anyway? What's that going to mean to me? How is that
Mm,
going to make things improve in my life and my career? And so I have a lot of people fill in dream boards as part of the coaching journey, but they're usually very vague. I want to live in my dream home. Okay, well, what does that look like? Is it home in the south? Is it a home in the north? How many bedrooms? Has it got a garden? What kind of budget do you want to spend on that? When do you want to achieve that by? Is it for children to have good education in the area that you're going to live to? Is it close to the clinic where you're going to build? They've got to be specific, measurable goals that, if you want to achieve them, you've got to then look back and think, right, from a clinic perspective, I then try and map out the goals and think, right, what kind of salary does that look like when you put all that goal together? And based on that, what kind of turnover would the clinic have to achieve to get to that? And you've got to map it down, thinking, right, if you push it 5 years in the distance, what are those measurable targets towards those 5 years to get to that?
yeah. I love that. That's so important. And speaking of figures, you've said to me when we've had a chat before that a lot of practitioners don't love selling, or they make a lot of mistakes when it comes to selling, but you actually do really enjoy it. So, what's your advice for making sales feel more natural and less like a push with patients?
Yeah, so the biggest thing that I see is people say they don't like sales, and medics specifically, they're not into sales and targets, and they don't want to talk to patients about, upselling or adding skincare, adding value, whatever you want to put it on words. Actually, when you start a business, you have to understand that without a sale, you have no business. And I say that, all the time to people, if you have no desire to sell, then you should just go and work in someone else's clinic with some goals that they set you to achieve in a day without that overall push on sales, because a business has to have a strategy, it has to have a break even, you have to have some goals, and your team will have to have some targets to get to those goals. So, and it's not about pushy sales, which is often what people say, oh, you can't push things that people don't need or want. No, it isn't. But when people come to a clinic, they come with a desire, with a dream, with a wish, with a need. They come to you, they come to that clinic because they've seen something that clinic offers to improve their life and their confidence. So when they come to the clinic, it's really, really important to put the patient in focus and putting a patient specific plan of action into place. And that will include a holistic approach to care. As we know in the medical field, we're all about holistic approach to care. It's not just one thing that's going to fix it. And today, in the market that we're working in today, it's all about wellness, living well, aging well, and people are going more along that route. So kind of when we have a patient in the clinic, it's all about holistic approach to care, from skin all the way down to what we're eating, and how we're living, and our lifestyle has to be factored into that. So what we tend to do is we put a plan of action in place that look at all those things. And then when you're passionate about something and you know it well, you're educating your patients. So you're not just saying, hey, you need a tub of this cream for your face today and it's £100. Thank you very much. Goodbye. You're saying, well, actually, from the needs that we've looked at you in the clinic and from your photographs and scans that we've done, these are the specific things that are really going to help you to achieve your goals. And then, yes, we do mention the price in there. It's not discussion of the whole conversation, but it's put in there so that the patient knows what they're thinking about embarking on, and they have it as a plan as well. So it's not about pushy sales, but if you're not talking to your patients about all those things, supplements, wellness, skincare, treatment packages, combinations, which we know work better today, then they're only going to go somewhere else and buy something else. And the potential is that they'll buy something else from somewhere. They've seen an advert and a promise online. And a lot of those things are not clinically proven and not going to work as well as what you can offer. And you're hand holding them through the journey because they're coming to your clinic for that patient experience. So, yes, you have to sell, but you're selling in the right way to your patients and supporting them to get from what they came in to achieve to where they want to be. So, it's not about pushy sales, but certainly talking about finance. Most clinic owners hate finance, not to mention sales. They hate finance overall, and they're not measuring their key performance indicators. And yes, I hate finance in many ways. I hate the boring numbers in spreadsheets things, as we all do. We're science buffs. We love to know the science about what treatment is going to work and how it works, and when the results are going to come by and how safe is it and all the parameters around it. We don't want to know about what number goes in where to finish
Yeah.
off the accounts, but it's so important that you measure your specific key performance indicators, because without those in place, you're driving a car without a map. So you're going somewhere without an end goal. And that end goal is getting your clinic to achieve its dream board,
Yeah.
your goals, and getting it to a place where it's ready to take the next step, which will be eventually an exit plan for you in clinic. So if you don't know any of the things that your clinic's achieving and you're not measuring it, it's kind of like going to work every day blindfolded.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any like quick tips that you can give practitioners listening to help improve their sales process or their revenue that they could that a lot of clinics aren't implementing when you speak to them that people could easily start implementing today?
So the quick tip is, imagine that you are a patient in your clinic, and go in there and look at all the touch points from even before they've come to the clinic. What messages are you giving out there to tell people about you and what they're going to get when they embark on a journey with you? And then when they're in there, how are they approached? How do you listen to your patients? How do you greet them? How do you tell them about their needs and wants and how you can achieve those? How do they feel in the business and what's driven them there in the first place? And following them up, how is the treatment feel? How do you make them feel during the treatment? What's the aftercare? What's the follow up? What's the journey? If you map out the patient journey and you think about the things that the patients want to achieve, you'll notice there's loads and loads of touch points there where a patient may need or want something that you've got on offer in your clinic, whether it be a service, whether it be a product, whether it be a treatment plan. You will have those, and you're educating your patients. So make sure that the things that you drive in your clinic, you are using them yourselves. You know how they work, you know what they are, you believe in them, you're passionate about them. Because if you're not, and you don't have the treatments and you don't know what they're like, the patient is not going to know either. And you need to be talking about those things. And if you do that and measure every day what you've achieved, what's going well, what isn't going well, then slowly your clinic will evolve into what you want it to be. And you will be, you think about Christmas, people coming more to clinics. You think about the summer holidays, people coming more to clinics. And it feels a little bit lighter because there's more revenue coming through. So the pressure is not as bad. But then we have those lag times in between, don't we, where, it's a little bit quieter. But if you consistently have a process that you replicate in that patient journey going through, then you're going to seize every opportunity. So even on those quiet times, you're not going to have so many dips. The pressure's not going to get as deep, and that you're going to have a continual cash flow stream through your business. So that's probably my biggest tip when it comes to, thinking about it, mapping out your patient journey and feeling like the patient on that journey in your own clinic.
Yeah, that process that you just mentioned to have in place, like have a strong process in place so that you're not feeling those dips as hard, in those quieter times of the year, what might that look like for a clinic?
It's all about thinking ahead and making sure that you're working the quarters of business and that you're almost one quarter ahead each time. So you're thinking, right, Christmas is busy. Some people are just in the realms of busyness when it comes to Christmas, but then it comes to January and they haven't really forecasted that it's going to be a little bit perhaps quieter because people have spent a lot of money over the season, and then it picks up again for the holiday. And then they don't think about, okay, when children go back to school and there's that gloomy autumn into winter time where it's quieter, you've got to think about that in advance. So think about 3 months before, what's the marketing plan? What treatments and offers are you going to have in place? When are you going to run events to help with those cash flow dips? All those sorts of things are really, really important, because that way, if you've got a consistent income coming through, know your break even. We're not here today talking just about finance. That's a whole speciality on its own. But if you know what it is costing for the clinics to open and close every day, then at least you have to make sure that that goal is hit. And then anything else is a bonus, right?
Yeah, absolutely love that. Now, I want to ask you about KOLs because you mentioned earlier on in this episode that a lot of people are sold a dream with a KOL, as a KOL, and it's not always what it seems. So, can you explain a little bit about what's going wrong in these situations?
When I started in the industry, it wasn't such a big thing. It wasn't named, there wasn't, KOL for this, KOL for that. You were just asked to speak at events or speak about your passion. And you did so because you loved to share the experience of what you were enjoying with it. But then it became this big, huge, I want to be a KOL, I want to be a KOL. And I'm thinking, well, what does that really and truly mean? What it means to be a key opinion leader. It's quite a big role and responsibility if you do it properly, because what you're doing is sharing your skills and expertise about something with someone else who wants to be where you are. So you have to understand that when you're giving that advice and information to other clinic owners, you do it properly, and you do give them valid tips, because they're going to go home and try and replicate it. So you have a responsibility. But too much now, people want to be a key opinion leader because they think it's standing on the stage and it's this glamorous, showy type of thing, traveling all over the country or all over the world. But actually, it's not what you think it is. I think that the key is you run a successful clinic, and that's where your presence needs to be, driving income to make sure that the business is running correctly. When you're taken away from your clinic as a key opinion leader, often those roles you don't get paid for. You do it through passion. And if you are doing it well, you should get rewarded for it, and you should know your worth. So you know to make sure that you've got a service contract that is giving you the revenue that you're replacing from coming out of your clinic for the day or the week. So that's number one priority. You can't not be present in your clinic and the clinic's suffering while you are thinking that you're achieving big, because being a key opinion leader, the customer doesn't really want to know about that. The client wants to know in a clinic that they're having a safe, successful treatment at the right price, that's going to be given the right support. So being a key opinion leader, it's not that it's a bad role. If it's done right with the right brands and you are passionate and you really want to help other clinics and it's serving you well in paying you to do that, that's fine. But too much today, companies have cottoned on to the fact that, people are so desperate for this celebrity status, I suppose is what you would call it. So what they say to, and I've seen it in my coaching clients, I've seen it in the industry, particularly the last few years, they promise you to be a key opinion leader, but really what they want is your sales. They want you to buy a device, or they want you to be a customer buying their brand. And once that you've done that, then they might ask you to come to a show and share your experience, but that's not something that you probably get paid for. And really, it's only going to help them scale up their sales. It's not about you and what you're going to achieve. Especially now, there's so many glamour events. I mean, I've seen them abroad and everywhere where people are taken on holiday, and it's free apparently, but it's clearly not free, is it? It's there to achieve a goal of a sale.
Exactly. And like you say, you're being taken out of your clinic. So really, it's really not free for you because
So
you're
it's
losing.
a double whammy, right? I mean, it's a real double whammy. You're actually getting taken out of your clinic to back to spend money you haven't got and losing revenue in your clinic while you're not there. So I think to me, it's don't get caught up in the madness. Speak, of course, about brands that you really are passionate about. And if you've worked with companies for a long time and you've got a really good working relationship with those brands and you really respect each other, there'll be a good partnership there where, you're getting rewarded for doing and supporting, but you're actually telling people your experience, your true experience, and helping others grow. That's what a real key opinion leader is. And it's got to be a balance. If you're running a clinic and you are the main revenue on the ground, like we talked about, the clinic's all about you. You can't be all of those things because there's only so many hours in the day. And I speak from experience. I've been all of those things. I've been, I've been speaking and training for things for years and years, but I've also been in a clinic really, really busy and then fighting fires. So it's about finding a balance. It's all about finding a balance and having collaborative working relationships where there's mutual respect on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the key is with the KOL thing is to be aware that a lot of brands are using it as more of a marketing tactic than anything else. And looks taking a step back and actually thinking, is this the best thing for me and my business? Looking at that dream board that you've spoken about, is this going to help me achieve those end goals on my dream board? And if it isn't, do I really want to be doing it? Yeah, I think that's important. When it comes to actually buying devices, I mean, we've talked about this, a lot, but what should people be looking at in service agreements or contracts with big device companies before signing on the dotted line?
Yeah, that's a really, really important question. So, like for me, we've got quite a few devices in our clinic, and that's kind of evolved through patient need over time. And like I said, things that patients can't often get on the NHS because they're so strained at the minute. And that combined with a little bit of passion as well of what I feel like the patients will need and want. So we have a lot of red-faced patients in North Wales. So ruddy red complexions and a lot of rosacea. So, our devices, can treat those conditions. So, but when you're buying those devices, we started with a multi-platform device in the beginning when we started. And that served the business need well because it was one purchase, but it had quite a few different services on there that could serve the business for a few years. And then as you become more experienced in the practice, then you think, okay, well, we really want to specialize in this. And therefore you'll buy a more specialized piece of kit. But when you do buy those kits, you've got to think about, okay, you're buying a device. So it's almost like buying a car, isn't it? Or buying a house. Right. So what does that need? You've got to make sure that all your team are trained in doing it properly. Does that come at cost? And not just an upfront cost of, you will get the training with a device, usually from the brand. But what about the ongoing cost of training and keeping up to date? And then you've got, insurance. How much more is it going to cost to insure you? What is the risk you're taking? What are the risks that can happen to your patients? What is the downtimes and what could go wrong? Then you're looking at pricing structures and how much does it cost to service this? How much cost to do the treatment in the clinic? It's not just what you're going to charge the patient, but it's what does it cost you to operate the machine? Is there any consumable parts on that machine that are costing you per service? Like, does it have any tips or you're getting charged for shots or anything like that? Anything extra, sterilization costs, everything. And of course, labor costs. But also, those machines will need servicing. And what I see often now is that these service level agreements that come out for brands are absolutely extortionate and they're not really worth the paper they're written on. And I think a lot of companies will use those as a steady income stream of pay monthly for your service level agreement or your consumable goods that you can only get from that brand. Because obviously they've sold a device and the money's in the new device sale. Of course it is, but once they've sold you that device, they've got to then try and have some income coming in. It's a business at the end of the day, isn't it? And I do get that. And I do get that the devices need servicing. So it's great that those services are available. you've got to look at the cost implication. And I can say some brands that I've seen, they charge too heavily for all those kind of things. And not only have you spent a lot of money on the device, but then you're getting really taken not taken advantage of with all these extras at the end of it. So that's what you've got to look at when you're purchasing the device. You're not just thinking, oh, I'd love to offer red vein treatment at my clinic. You know, yeah, that's one thing, but it's like, well, how much does that, how many patients want that red vein treatment? How much is it costing me to bring it in and run the service? But then the final part of it you've got to think about is, well, there's two final parts. One of them is, are all your staff on board with it? Do they want to offer this service? Are they going to be passionate about it? Otherwise, you're going to be the one who's busy and you're already too busy. But number two is you've got to market these devices and treatments to patients, and that isn't free. You've got to have a marketing strategy and it's got to move forward, so, and it's got to continually be bringing revenue. And then finally, you might be 5 years in, and if you haven't made your lease agreement back by then, and you haven't made your revenue, you are really on the back foot because by that point in time, your device is out of date and you're going to need to upgrade it to something new. So that's what you have to think about when you're buying a piece of kit. And I'm not saying that buying a piece of kit's bad. It's not. We need kit in our clinics to be able to service what patients are coming into, what they want to get rid of, or what they want to treat. But it's making sure that you buy the right device. And just because you've got a champagne dinner or you're invited to some flyaway convention, or I don't know, you might have a glass of champagne on the stand even these days at the events. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean, they're selling you a promise of success. The success comes from the planning that you do to make your clinic successful with the treatments that you offer, not from just going to buy a device. And there might be a device around the corner in the convention which does exactly the same thing with a named family brand that looks after you, and you don't get all those extra shiny bits, and you're not going to be a key opinion leader, but you don't need that anyway. And that machine might be half the price and do just exactly the same thing.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Such good advice. Such good advice. I also wanted to quickly ask you about your tips for hiring. So, like, how clinic owners can know when it's the right time to hire someone and bring on someone new, and mistakes to avoid that you often see clinic owners make with that process.
Yeah, so that is probably the hardest thing I would say in the 18 years of being in business is hiring, firing staff. And, in the beginning when I started, I was, very naive and thinking everybody was going to be like me, super driven, super, super determined and giving it their all. And actually that's not the case. Otherwise they'd be having their own business just like you. So you need to think about, the personality types that you're hiring, not just what it says on a CV. It's the personality that's the most important part. And that was me, my biggest tip to you. It's the personality. Yes, you're working closely with people in a business. You're a team, you're a family team, you're growing this team, you're the boss. And there's a fine line between being friendly and being over friendly, because when something goes wrong, you have to deal with that. So you have to make sure that you have a professional line that you don't cross, and that you think of it's a business at the end of the day. And no matter how much you want to sugarcoat it, if you hire somebody in a business, they have to be adding value to the brand. And if they're not doing that, then soon enough, the business will start losing revenue or losing reputation, depending on the standard, and you have to deal with it. So when you're hiring, you are making sure that the hiring process, the advertising and the marketing behind that looks attractive to the person you want to be having in the business. You're not just looking at qualifications of somebody, you're looking at their personality. It's really good these days to do your personality type training, like your insights or your discoveries or your disc training. And you'll learn about you, but learn about yourself first, because you'll know what your good and your bad looks like once you've done this training. And you need people in your business that complement that. You don't want people that rub up against you as the director. It's not going to work, and you'll end up with a lawsuit against you. So you need to find people that complement your personality, that help you grow, but also learn that sometimes you will make mistakes. Because remember, on interview, especially nowadays, people using ChatGPT for everything, aren't they? They're going to come in and you're gonna be wowed in the interview process because everyone sells their best self. But you need to have a trial period, because not everybody is what they say on the tin. And you figure that out when you have a working relationship, and have exit plans for people. If it's not working out, don't take it personally. That's the biggest message. Don't take it personally. It's a business and it's there to serve a need for wherever you started it.
I love that. And I love what you just said about, was it personality tests you mentioned? Where can people do that? That sounds
So
amazing.
there's quite a few free ones online. I follow the Tony Robbins website, and I'm sure
Yeah.
there's a free one on there, or there was. But certainly you can hire companies to do this. It's expensive, so unless you're a big company with a big enough team to justify that cost, it's not something you want to do right now. But there is certainly things you can listen to online, or free tests you can do on yourself, just to get to grips with, who you are first. And then that testing is brilliant for sales as well, by the way. For those of you who don't like sales, which we know all medics don't really like sales. So the personality type is so interesting, not just for hiring the right team and making sure you've got the right people around you, but when you're communicating with your patients too. Some people like a tactile hug or a shake hand. Other people are very standoffish. And the sooner you get to understand how to approach a personality, speaking in their tone, you're going to get much more from your workforce and much more from your customer.
Yeah, love that. That's such a good tip. Yeah, I think more people should do that. And like you say, then you'll know what's lacking in your own personality or your own, like, things you don't enjoy doing. You know, that's what you need
Give them
more
away
in somebody else. Yeah.
and realize what your biggest strengths are and work
Yeah.
towards those. The things that you hate or you're not good at, give them to
Give
somebody
them to someone
else.
else.
Work
Yeah,
on those.
absolutely. Love that. Okay, so before we wrap up this episode, I just want to ask you a couple of quick fire questions. So, what's one mindset shift that has really helped you grow in clinic coaching or both?
A mindset shift for me is, don't ever think about anybody else. Think about you and make sure what you want to achieve is what you're following. Don't have imposter syndrome by looking at what they're doing. You want to be like them. You don't. You want to be you. You want to be authentic. You want to be yourself. Just stay on your own train and you won't feel wrong if you follow a plan.
Love that. For practitioners listening who do feel stuck at the moment, maybe they've invested badly or they're not seeing growth at the rate they want to be seeing it, what's the first thing that you think that they should look at today?
They should look at their numbers, where they're at, what they're achieving, and look at 3 things that you could do today to change the company strategy so that you can actually start winning. Whether that be you're taking too much time doing things that are not serving you, whether that be whether you're working too hard in your business and not on it, or whether you bought a device that you really haven't given it the input. You need to spend at least 90 minutes a day working and developing your business. And everybody needs a coach and somebody to help them. So forever, I've had a coach in my life because it keeps you accountable. And if you don't think that's for you right now, or you don't think you can afford it, it's probably the best investment you'd ever make. But if you don't want to do that, just make sure you've got a circle of people around you that you can vent off and ask advice. But make sure when you do ask advice, the advice you're taking, make sure it's off somebody that's been there, done that, and is bigger than you.
Yes, that's so good. Yeah, I've had people say that before. I think that's such good advice. And there's so many great communities in aesthetics as well. You've got like the Nurses Network, BAMAN, like there's so many places where you can meet people and yeah, develop those kind of groups that you can kind of bounce ideas off of. But this episode has been amazing. Thank you so much. You've given so much great advice and tips. I'm sure people will take away a lot from it. So if someone's listening to this and thinking, I need Sara in my corner, where is the best place to find out more about you and your business?
They can reach out to me on Instagram or Facebook, Sara Cheeney, or you can get in touch on our website, which is clinicsuccess.com. If you've got any questions or you think that you need somebody to talk to, there's plenty of supportive people within our industry, but you can always speak to me if you need to.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I will drop all your details as well in the show notes. So people, if you're listening and you want to find Sara, just have a look at show notes and go over and follow her on Instagram and connect with her there. But thank you so much. This has been an amazing episode.
Thank you for having me.